Ex-cult members of Reddit, what's your story? How did you end up in a cult? How did you escape? I was born into a cult. It doesn't seem strange when you grow up in it. Even after I left, it took years to realize how very fucked up it all was. They believed in free love, you were married to Jesus, spouses slept around freely, girls as young as 14 were seen as old enough. On the surface, they told everyone 16 was the age you could consent. But kid diddlers flocked to sex cults, and the one I grew up in was no exception. My parents are good people, most people in the group are good people. But they are incredibly naive. They believed that the stories of underage kids being molested were lies spread about by our enemies. I left when I moved to another country. I was a coward and didn't make a big deal of leaving. I didn't want to cause a scene with my parents. I told them I was moving to a country, state where everyone was Christian. There wasn't really a reason to go out and try to convert people. To this day I still haven't told them how older boys molested me, how I hate hugs now because I would be forced to hug creepy uncles for a little too long. How my younger sister confided in me that she was molested by one of those creepy uncles. I'm extra vague if people ask me how I grew up. No one in my current life beyond my husband knows about how I grew up. It's my dirty secret. The cult dissolved when the leader died. My parents are no longer in it and I've buried it with my past. Other ex-members are extremely bitter and I don't want to turn out like them. There's no point looking to the past. I've made a new future for me and my children. I'm happy now. Most cults don't start as such. They evolve into cults as the leader gains absolute devotion to the point he can overrule the Bible without losing any of the members. Mine started as a simple non-denominational evangelical church. Then the pastor started making weird claims about himself. Some people started having visions confirming the pastor's claim. Any doubtful soul was quickly rebuked as lacking of faith. I was quarantined in that bucket, then quit when he promoted himself to apostle and changed his name to Paul. A lady had a vision that God is changing his name to Paul. Now he goes by Apostle Paul. It's still going on. Last I heard there were fierce infighting. The apostle initiated a purge to get rid of rising stars below him. Others had started having visions about themselves, challenging the uniqueness of the apostle. It's sad. I genuinely think he was initially sincere, but got corrupt along the way. Edits. I typed the post with one hand, standing in the train. Apologies for the grammar mess and typos. What I meant by quarantined in the bucket is that you are put in a literal corner and given a low faith label. They then control who speaks to you, what event you are invited to. You are basically put in a quarantine. Sermons start being tailored to you and your likes, increasingly threatening and condemning. Prophets start getting dark messages from God about you and your non-belief in the man of God, apostle. One other thing to know about cults is that they don't grow in numbers and reach, but rather shrink or hold on to the gullible core of the congregation. They prey on the gullible by proclaiming them very special and set apart. It gives them a false sense of uniqueness. Some people think they are special to God more than anyone else. For those who didn't get it, renaming himself to Paul was, imho, a cunning and strategic move to elevate himself to the level of the real Apostle Paul, who wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. That was my perception. For those who've been asking, I am still a believer in Christ and I still attend and active in my current church. The same way you don't say mathematics are a hoax just because your high school teacher was bad at it, I don't tie my redemption to that poor fella, now apostle. And yes, I am still talking to many still trapped in the cult. I did make many friends in there, great people, and many seem to know it's all wrong, but they cannot leave until their wives, for example, come to the same conclusion. I have seen the apostle authorize and bless divorces due to one in the couple leaving. I was a part of a family cult some years ago. It is largely spiritual based with similarities with the I Am Activity cult. At first when I moved on with the family, things weren't too bad. We did channelings with beings, star people and ascended masters, etc. We also dedicated our lives to finding all of the negative beliefs and ideas we had about ourselves and the world and finding out the truth. Things turned much worse after living there for a couple of years. My life started consisting of trying to listen to what messages my higher self, ascended masters, star people and other beings were giving us. It could be something like a song playing on the radio, a passage on a book, a situation that keeps popping up. Getting cut off on traffic is an example of a repeated situation that we'd try to find out what the mirror was if it happened. My entire waking life was spent working on my negative beliefs or helping one of the other people with their issues. The head of the family would usually play mediator or help sort out things we weren't able richer through. We also had loaded words like rewiring, maps, integration that had much different meanings than society. We viewed society as brainwashed and people who were tricked into not seeing that we had a bigger reason for living, which was to find the truth of who we were so we could eventually become our authentic selves. We work on ourselves whether we were at work, on holidays, being woken up in the middle of the night, staying up till 6 or 7 in the morning doing work. I ended up leaving when I started feeling so stressed all the time and basically a shell of myself. Leaving the family I was familiar with was so hard, especially since we learned and did things that society didn't do. I also had to come to terms with that if I left, it'd basically give up the ability to live forever. Our belief was if we worked on ourselves enough we'd live forever and be able to create anything we needed. That was very hard to come to terms with. I don't want to go into more detail with how I left, but just that it's been years since I left and I'm still trying to figure out what reality means to me, what I believe, who I am, and basically I'm trying to reformulate my self-identity. And I'm afraid of dying now. It's been hard, I guess. I ended up into it via pressure and a lot of negative reinforcement from my abusive father, who told me I needed the structure and mixed that with a lot of shaming and deflection of how he'd fucked up in my life. My father is, I think, undiagnosed BPD, and he got involved in the cult and encouraged me to be so as well, when he was divorcing my mum and dating one of the members. He basically dropped me on them as a teenager and left. It is a Hindu cult. And TBH, at first a lot of things I really liked about it were because it was progressive. But I also stayed for as long as I did because I sincerely was meant to believe that I was unlovable and the cult was the only place I would be accepted. My own family rejected me. I stayed and worked my ass off for almost 10 years. Towards the end I could not keep my blinders up anymore. One of the most unsettling things was how much authority the guru had and how people would come at you with zero forgiveness if you dared question things. Growing up in an abusive home, this was normal, though not to the extent of the groupthink there. My home life was worse than cult life, but one day I realized if I was going to stay there anymore I would go crazy or worse, things that set me off in the end. Being sexually assaulted by a high-ranking member and then told I needed to be publicly friends with the member. I was merely ignoring him, BTW, for the good of the public program. How much certain golden boys and girls of the week would get uplifted and generously helped while I had slaved away for years getting not the slightest recognition. One of those boys literally pushed me off a 9-foot wall while I was working because I almost accidentally stepped above a Ganesh statue. Which was disrespectful to him, BTW. This wasn't even a rule at the cult, he was just extremely fanatical. How people could have all kinds of energetic cryers or charismatic expulsions of energy during meditation where they would groan, cry, yell and make orgasmic sighs, but no one would ever laugh. Yet I often had the urge to laugh during meditation, just even with pure joy, but it was not allowed. This is when I started to realize how little laughter ever happened there. which then reiterated how fake happy everyone was. We all lived together so closely, but no one knew anyone. 2 people almost died in their rooms alone because no one checked on anyone. It was then that I realized how little caring anyone really had for anyone here. We knew each other for years, but none of us actually knew anyone. People with millions of dollars being so absolutely petty and selfish. For example, one particular top-level guy consistently breaking the 1 item per person rule for communal food. He would cut to the front of the line and heap his plate high with that single thing and then get another plate and guarantee that others then would get nothing. Yet I knew he had millions and millions. Doing the math on how much money was made and spent versus how much we were told we had. Consistent and disgusting violations of my privacy and rights as a worker. Being told to lie and get SSI, I refused, while they worked me every day and paid me under the table. I worked very dangerously, chainsaws, scaffold, concrete, power tools, cherry pickers, high voltage etc. Yet was never offered any coverage. Meanwhile, ladies who were current favorites of the guru, sexually, were put in positions in the yoga program part and given full healthcare and dental coverage. I worked my ass off and never screamed at anyone, yet was told I would never be allowed to teach yoga because I had anger problems, yet I had been yelled at by many higher-ranking members explosively even. This rumor only occurred due to the fact I had a bad breakup with the son of a high-ranking member. I was one of the few younger people who ever stayed there. Many committed or attempted suicide BTW, and it was always covered up. My rules were arbitrary. Many people there who had the money were alkies, did weed and even harder drugs. They'd also fuck off to ski resorts, miss meditations and talks, and barely contribute. I never drank or did weed, and was never, even while in school at the same time, allowed to skip a meditation class. Ever. I was constantly threatened with expulsion. I was on food stamps and people knew, but they would constantly buy themselves literally gold and diamonds because their astrologer or the guru told them to. I didn't have a car and had to ride the bus crazy hours for work, and no one ever offered me a ride or even to teach me to drive even when I bought a car with my own money. I had an ovarian cyst that burst and I had to beg to be driven to the emergency room and given so much shit for it by a high-ranking member. I was discharged 2 days later at 4 AM and no one would pick me up, and I had to walk to the commune for about 2 miles high off my tits. In the dark in the frosty winter, phone battery was dead, I had no money, and for some reason no voucher for a cab was given to me in ER. So how did I escape? I merely got myself kicked out. I started sneaking out to comedy open mix after meditation, literally jumping a fence to do so, and around that time, nothing happened dramatically BTW. I was merely told I had spiritual poison and had a month to leave. I think another member, possibly Golden Boy who pushed me off a wall, was spreading lies about me. Apparently I was going to be given less than 72 hours to vacate, in the middle of winter BTW, and they knew I had less than 0 support from the outside. But another cult friend stood up for me and begged them not to do that to me, so they gave me a month. I got a job at a gas station and found a place to live, in a horrible slumlord house, but I digress. In less than 30 days. A few days before my eviction day, I had a few things left in my old room in the commune and they violated the agreement and threw my possessions on the street. I was not able to recover everything. I only later learned this was illegal. They wanted me out that bad lol. All because I started not giving a shit, merely saying no to their hypocritical and arbitrary rules, and laughing at life. My first year was hell, and why I specifically hate anyone who advocates that poor people can just pull themselves by their bootstraps, and fuck anyone who argues we need less regulation and protection of workers and tenants' rights. I had a slumlord throw broken glass at me, I had an assistant manager at the gas station physically attack me, and when I called the police on them I was fired in retaliation. I had another living situation where the co-owner's daughter tried to frame me as a heroin addict so she could illegally evict me, also had to get cops involved in that. And then after that I lived with some brutally awful alky roomies who had horrible fights at 3 AM that scared the crap out of me. In 1 year I had to call the cops I think 4 times to my house, 10 times to my work. It gave me PTSD actually. Being poor and completely on your own is no joke, and people will try their damnedest to take advantage of you. I wasn't sure I'd make it through my first year. But since then I now have a salaried position and my own place all to myself, a cozy town home. Getting out of the cult started the process of my healing from a lifetime of abuse from my borderline personality disordered / narcissistic personality disordered family. I guess the tough thing for me right now is knowing if I didn't come from abuse I would have had so many more opportunities in life. People are so quick to tag their own survivorship and self-confidence bias on their overall political worldview, and they literally have zero idea about real hardship, or grossly overestimate their own luck despite it. What I hate most is that I hate thinking that I'm a statistic of what abused daughters end up being like. It seems like society thinks sexism is over and that girls don't have any more barriers in life. I can tell you straight up that even in this hippie new age commune the sexism and sexual assault was rampant and went all the way to the top. And in school I encountered it, from my teachers, and it does wear you down, and in some cases literally you are barred from equal participation. Oh, and one last thing I want to say, most of the time I held 2 jobs plus went to school while I was in this cult. Lots of cult people aren't obviously cult people. And also lots of aspects of this cult were extremely normal looking to the outside. And that normalness is what sucked in a lot of people including myself. Especially an outward appearance of being LGBT and woman-friendly and progressive. I was raised Catholic. I highly recommend the movie Holy Hell on Netflix. It's scary how similar that cult was to what I went through. Not me, but my father was part of the love family that Charles Manson led. He lived in Death Valley with them for 2 years from ages 15-17. He was a runaway and went by the name Coyote back then. The story I was told is that he finally got out by being physically kidnapped by some friends. He did not want to leave. My mom entered the cult from my uncle. My dad saw through the bullshit and vehemently refused to conform to her ideals. They divorced because of this. My mum made me absolutely hate my dad and made it like he abandoned our family. He did in a way, but when your wife completely changes as a person and begins talking about having visions of the master and walking with giants, then you have to question whether it is the same person you married. I honestly don't blame him because he was still very much a part of our lives after the divorce. Even though I was completely brainwashed about the cult's learnings, I felt guilty for watching TV shows that showed greed, so I would meditate for 2 hours to clear my sins of watching that TV show. It was disgustingly cruel to submit your child to such a fearful way of life. We had a point system for karma, I kid you fucking not. If you masturbated you deducted 80 points, you thought bad thoughts about women it was 30 points, so on and so forth. You could gain heavenly points by donating to the master, purchasing her gifts and meditating. This was very effective way of tracking progress in your spiritual journey, and I think it's a major reason why this cult was so effective. That was the one benefit I gained from the cult. They had a genuine understanding about meditation, but as you got promoted further along in the cult, the meditation techniques became insane. Even to this day I feel scared to talk about the meditation techniques because it was drilled into us at the age of 12 that we would face serious sins if we told people outside the religion our meditative techniques. I later found out we actually practiced a form of lucid dreaming, and the visions my mum were seeing were just dreams of the hundreds of bullshit text the master wrote to brainwash her followers. So if you are reading hundreds of pages about the master's journey into heaven where she walked with giants, then when you lucid dream, that's what you will fucking see. There is a TV channel with hundreds of dedicated actors, newscasters, programmers etc. helping to create an all-in-one brainwashing channel. We also practiced veganism, which was nice because I felt good about not hurting animals. There was no sexual abuse, it was a legitimate well-being cult with delusional teachings. It also heavily extorted their followers. My mum bought a painting made by the master for $400 and it was a picture of a clown that my dog could draw. There were also bracelets that protected you from sin, whatever the fuck that means, and they cost $250. Anyhow, my mum has mild paranoia disorder, and there was one period where she thought we were being tracked by a crazy lady in another country. But she is getting better now, although she will never leave the cult because she saw my grandpa in one of her meditations and had a full conversation with him. He was also a cult member, so this solidified her total belief into the cult because she saw it with her own eyes. I still feel guilty for touching my girlfriend, and I have a very hard time trusting people. It has fucked me up, but it also taught me how to meditate well, so I guess that was good. Tons of people joke about this, but getting out is seriously hard. Even though I got out of the cult years ago, it is something I think about, and something that still affects me to this day. My time with the cult was the best of times, and the worst of times. I felt so loved, like I belonged, like I had a real family. That is how I ended up in it. We went to a service to check it out, and they were so friendly. It takes time before they say things like, "You don't have kids because you are cursed by God." Or they talk to your husband about how uppity his wife is and how he needs to make her submit more. Thank goodness my husband is the type to say, "She is her own person with her own mind. I don't control anything." And then when you go to leave, and you look around and you realize you don't have any friends except the people in the cult, you realize that the years that you have spent in this fantasy world have taken everyone you knew before and swooped them away. The people you loved like family say cruel things, and then you are shunned, and it is as if you never existed to them. It's hard, so hard. It took years and years for my husband and I to make friends, and even now we hold them at an arm's length. Oh, and I must not be cursed by God anymore because I now have 2 beautiful daughters. Thank goodness I had them after I left. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you liked today's video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing for future videos. If you want more right now, click on one of the cards on the screen to watch another one of my videos. Thanks again for watching. Please stay safe everyone, until next time.